Well, thank you for being engaged. A lot of your conversations were pretty interesting. I got to sneak in and listen in on a few of them. Hopefully you met some new friends and partners. That's one of our goals here. We thought it might be sobering. Here we are, at the end days of 2018 to think about what's coming next. And water is going to be at the center of what comes next. And we decided to pick not just California, because we've been very California-centric this morning, but go across to another side of the world in the Middle East, and particularly in the United Arab Emirates, and particularly in Dubai, to look at the contrasts of the challenges facing the water resilient mandate that we know our cities have to address. And we just had a report, the National Climate Assessment here in the United States, following the one from 2014. In 2014, there were a whole bunch of predictions, and now it turns out these are real. These are not just forecast realities in the water domain. We have flooding on a regular basis in Miami and Charleston, for instance, directly resulting from sea level rise. But we have severe droughts as well. California happens to have both of these challenges. And we're here today to really ask two leading experts in the world, each from their respective geographies, to think out loud with us about ways that we can get to the next level of adapting our systems, all of our economic systems, all of our political systems, but especially our natural systems for the climate change that's upon us. So you've maybe read the intros, but I'll ask each of you when you answer my first question to tell a little bit about yourself so that they understand the kind of work that you're doing beyond what's written in the biography. But for Camille, since you've traveled the farthest, you get the first shot. Coming from Dubai, you have a frontier city in the Arabian Gulf, and lots of climate adaptation experiments are underway. A lot of new resiliency strategies have been adopted and now under development in the cities that you work in, especially in Dubai. How is that work that you're doing useful for the rest of us who aren't living in Dubai? What can we take home from Dubai today that you bring us that we can potentially apply in the places where we live and work?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Gordon, for this invitation and the Meeting of the Minds team to organize this. It's an amazing event. A little background before. Cities in the Gulf are and have always been at the edge of livability because they have close to zero surface water, scarce rainfall, long and hot summers that last 6 months of the year. Historically, population there lived under these harsh conditions of living, adapted to them because they were small in numbers, and also they were using traditional cooling techniques to survive in this environment. Very quickly, the 20th century, oil discovery, first urban boom in the Gulf. At the end of the 20th century, Arabian Gulf cities started their quest for diversification, focusing on tourism, real estate, logistics, financial services, etc. That's when the population grew exponentially, turning what were mere oil terminals focused on resource extraction to global urban hubs. And Dubai is the best example of a global urban hub in the region. This was made possible for technologies like desalination and cooling that we know are CO2 intensive and costly. So during this period, cities in the Arabian Gulf grew and developed despite or even against their natural environment, creating a perception of abundance. A perception of abundance that dictates today all individual, corporate, urban, government behaviors. So when we talk about frontier cities, the Gulf cities are the best example of that because an even warmer climate, even warmer and drier climate, will make them use more of the same technologies, aggravating their impact in terms of CO2 and budget. but also lowering their efficiencies for reasons we can talk about later. So the processes of producing fresh water and cool air are going to be impacted by higher temperature. So in the Gulf, it's not a question of type of change, it's more a magnitude of change. If we leave aside sea level rise, if we talk only about temperatures. So it's a magnitude. And the Gulf cities will have to find new solutions, and we're going to talk about them in a bit, or things that they are trying to find. So new solutions to old problems that are currently aggravating.
And are you seeing right now a dramatic uptick in Middle Eastern cities learning from each other? Are you getting lots of delegations coming to Dubai looking at what the Water Agency or the Energy Authority or the Transportation Agency are doing?
Definitely. Dubai is becoming a benchmark for the region in terms of water efficiency, water desalination, the new technology that they're using, because most of the water in Dubai is produced through cogeneration, which means that the power plant, there's a gas turbine that produces waste heat. So it produces electricity, and the waste heat is used for water desalination. So it couples electricity and water production, which creates sometimes, given the high demand in electricity, creates water overcapacity. So some cities are re-injecting it in the groundwater to use it for future security. The other problem of cogeneration is that now there's a trend towards renewable energy. And with the weather there, solar is really on the go. The problem with solar energy is that we move away from cogeneration, so there is a decoupling between water and electricity production. So there might be, as more solar panels are built, so solar plants are built, a water problem in the future.
Those who want to learn more about what's happening, DEWA is the company, the Dubai Energy and Water Authority that's really at the center of a lot of these experiments.
Exactly.
But let me transition now to the California situation, Nicholas. So, we're here, the climate shift is nudging a lot of water decision-making that has been delayed, largely due to politics. It's not necessarily a technical problem per se, but the challenge is the pressure, is building, but already the system is massively overwhelmed by human action, by a lot of water utilization decisions that the state has made. You argue in a lot of your papers that California has developed a unique water management model. You call it the California model. And I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit of that for those who haven't read what I have, but also to maybe explain how we got there, what led to those kinds of water management approaches that have been developed here and that particularly could be useful outside.
So thank you, Gordon. You asked for an introduction. I'm Nicholas Pinter. I'm Schliemann Professor in Applied Geoscience at UC Davis, about 20 minutes to the west from here, an Associate Director of the Center for Watershed Sciences on campus. So water resilience, California and elsewhere. California is not a water-poor state or location. The state generates, on average, 100 cubic kilometers of runoff surface water per year. Nonetheless, the state's ecosystems and parts of its economy have been water limited for decades. What California has done is developed a diverse toolkit for managing to thrive economically and in some other ways despite those water limitations. So that's what we call the California model. So really the defining and most challenging aspect of California's water system is the high degree of variability. So we have a Mediterranean climate with most of the rain just starting now. It's snowing up in the Sierra Peaks right now. We get most of our precipitation within just a few short months of the winter. Also interannual variability. So California from year to year is quantifiably the most variable area of the United States. So that really generates the main challenge for the state. And we whipsaw from multi-year droughts to floods, sometimes with no time in between. And it's really that variability which has driven water solutions in California, whereas other areas have time To recover and often lapse into a false sense of security between their water crises, California has no choice but to forge forward. We've developed what we call far-sighted incrementalism, and that is long-term planning, not trying to solve every single problem in each crisis, but have the solution in mind and move forward. And again, what we're dealing with in terms of water resilience is both water scarcity during the dry years and water excess during the flood years. So if you want specifics, I can very quickly summarize.
Do, and then I'm going to ask you about the layer cake of different layers of decision making.
Okay, great. So on the drought side, California has learned to rely upon a multi-tiered water supply system. So water supply in the state survives the dry years through a large number of dams, many tens of millions of acre feet stored between years. We rely upon, Camille and I were talking about long distance transport of water being important to particularly Southern California. We rely upon groundwater banking, at least theoretically, to survive the drought years, particularly for agriculture, and other techniques. For flood control, there's lots of innovations that California has developed. I'd just like to point out one in our backyard. So Sacramento and Davis are separated by the YOLO bypass, which is a system developed after multiple failures of the levee system in the late 1800s and early 1900s. That levees only approach was abandoned after the flooding 1907. And this bypass, 68-kilometer bypass system was developed that takes up to 80% of the Sacramento River water away from downtown Sacramento and puts it into this alternative channel. Multiple uses and benefits are derived from the channel, not only flood control, but it is a very important wildlife habitat location. It allows groundwater recharge and continued agricultural use of that area. And engineers and water managers, flood managers from all around the world come to study it. So California doesn't get everything right, but there's a number of things to point to as successes of the California model.
Well, I imagine during the Q&A over lunch, you're going to get questions from city leaders about what cities can do. They don't run the PUCs, right? So they don't set the rules for the water utilities. They don't run their own water utilities in most cases. Dubai is a bit of an exception in that sense, and there are large cities like Los Angeles that also do this, but mostly cities don't own their water utility, at least in North America. And so, many of these city leaders who are in the room are looking at the urban response to climate change, and would prefer not to be spectators waiting for the utilities and waiting for the Public Utilities Commission and waiting for the state legislature. They want to act in order to secure their future. And I guess the question for both of you is, what are the things that you think cities can do, even if they don't own their own utilities, like water and electricity? Are there some steps they can take that you think benefit on cooling in the way that the city form and physical space is designed and built? In the Dubai model, for instance, because we heard some of the California model. I'll come back and ask the same question, but start with Dubai.
Well, unfortunately, today, the Gulf cities are being built as if they were built in the north with lots of steel and glass skyscrapers, which is not adapted at all. When you think of the architecture of the 50s and 60s there, it was much more concrete and stone and small windows. This is one point. On cooling, there's a trend in the whole Gulf to move from individual cooling, it's the classical air condition, to district cooling. District cooling is much more electricity efficient, energy efficient than individual cooling for buildings, but it's very water intensive. So increasingly, this district cooling is competing with landscaping for treated sewage water, recycled water, basically.
And when I walk through Masdar, I see some design choices that are made to encourage the flow of cool air through the neighborhood. Can you talk a little about that?
Yes, Masdar has, well, if you go back in history...
Explain Masdar for those who don't know it first.
Masdar was a project for a zero carbon city, basically. And it's now a campus where there's lots of research and development that is being made on cool cities, but also water, electricity, energy efficiency, etc. So it's basically how to build a green zero carbon city. That's the thought of Masdar. On the cooling side, yes, historically, buildings in the old part of the Arabian Gulf has cooling towers. So it's a passive way for cooling houses where it catches the high air, which is cooler, cools it more through a water system and injects it in the room. What Masdar did, and there's also an example in Dubai, the Sustainable City, which is a private development. What they did is that they put cooling towers on little piazzas. So you have a public space that is cooler than it would have been without the tower, because the tower is catching the high air, cooling it through a passive water system and redistributing it at the street level.
It really is something to see, and I guess, you have the benefit of all of that oil and gas wealth, but the Sheikh Mohammed and the other leaders in Dubai know that this is not going to last forever. Eventually, we're going to stop buying that stuff here, and probably the Europeans will stop buying it, and maybe it'll be at the right moment to transition to the post-petroleum economy.
Exactly.
Can you say anything about where we are in that process for
Yes,
Dubai?
well, the first challenge as I said, of Gulf cities was to grow despite a hostile environment. And obviously, with the buzzing hub that they are now and economic diversification that is rather successful in some of these cities, mainly Dubai, was the big challenge of the end of the 20th century. The next challenge will be, yes, how to become, I don't want to say post-oil, but at least sustainable. How to become, so sustainability is going to be the next challenge of Gulf cities. In terms of water, of course, which is the biggest stress of this region.
Well, you have the benefit in Dubai and the Council of Governments where you're based of all of that private sector innovation that's being attracted because of the resources that are being invested. The city is an early adopter. It's become a test bed for a lot of these innovations like Masdar. And Masdar started 12 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, they were early to this before it was cool and fashionable. So unlike Dubai, water management in California includes planning for floods. This is not a challenge they have, but is also droughts. Are there some solutions in the flood risk management category that have been developed in California that you think are replicable, scalable, transferable to other places in the world, especially urban centers?
There absolutely are. So again, flood researcher, we can talk about water resources, but flooding is definitely among the water challenges in California, as we found out 2 years ago, and who knows for the future. It's just a matter of time. So we already talked about the system of bypasses, the YOLO and Sutter bypasses developed in California. Again, the key elements of those are the conjunctive uses. That's really a key element of a successful flood management system. Ecosystem and engineering, water resources benefits, all working in the same direction. I'd also like to call out recent legislation in the state of California that raised the protection standard for urban levees here in the Central Valley of California from the 100-year protection level that's mandated by the US federal government, that's the FEMA standard, to 200 years level of protection, protecting Sacramento, for example. This is still a far cry from the 1,000-year protection level that's guaranteed by, for river levees in the Netherlands, for example. But it's double the standard in the US and certainly setting the path forward for other regions in the country. And then I just wanted to mention quickly a new initiative. This is a partnership from UC Davis and the California Department of Water Resources. We're right now exploring the possibilities for California to fix some of the shortcomings of the US National Flood Insurance Program. Right now on its 9th or 10th short-term extension, stymied by political inaction in Washington, some $20 billion in debt to the US Treasury, even after Congress forgave $13 billion of debt after Hurricane Harvey. California has the expertise and the willpower to fix some of the national problems and set examples for the US, and we're also looking worldwide at models of flood risk management using insurance and other tools, again, from any good example we can find worldwide.
I mean, the financial engineering challenges, as somebody who's written a lot of checks to the National Flood Insurance Program over the years, I know that every time I write that check, I think to myself, it would be nice to re-engineer this so that there were actual benefits to the insured. But I think if you look at the California policyholders from the National Flood Insurance Program, there's not a great deal of value coming back to California for all the billions that we're putting into that system.
So the annual shortfall averages $200 million a year going out of California to other states. So whereas, for example, the state of Mississippi gets $5.61 of disaster claim payouts per $1 of premiums paid into the National Flood Insurance Program, California gets 14 cents back in payouts per dollar. California is aware of this, and this is not like health insurance where the healthy are subsidizing. You're supposed to pay for your own risk. California has done some things right and is looking at investing that funding stream locally in flood risk reduction and other benefits.
All right, well, we have less than 5 minutes, so I'll come back to Dubai for a moment, toggling between these two worlds. You've developed a list of some of the innovative solutions. You mentioned one on the cooling design scenario that Masdar has adopted, but can you tick off some of those that you think have real applicability here?
Actually, I'm gonna talk about two of them. The first one is, you said that Dubai was, and the Gulf in general, was an early adopter of new technologies. There's also increasingly research and development that is being done there, specifically in Dubai in the field of biosaline agriculture. So how to increase crops efficiency in saline environments. And even how to find crops that can be grown with seawater. Because food, as we heard earlier, is also one of the main challenges of tomorrow's sustainability. So, and specifically in the Gulf, when we know that on average, 50% of the water resources are used for agriculture, and it contributes on average only 1% of the GDP. So there is something to be done here. And crops efficiency in saline environments can be a solution. It's still in its infancy, but and there's a center in Dubai that is doing research in this direction. The second one, and it's increasingly happening in the Gulf, it's recycled water. How to reuse it and how to give it back to nature. There's an interesting example in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where in the 80s there was a big treated sewage plant that was producing a constant stream of poorly treated water. They recently upgraded the plant to further purify the water, planted the stream with vegetation to even further purify it, built a series of dams, so there small lakes, and now you have an interesting public space which was lacking a lot in Riyadh, in a city like Riyadh, a public space where a citizen can go and enjoy nature, and it's a very interesting example of green and blue infrastructure project.
So where is the next kind of frontier? I mean, the government has really done a lot of investing of hard dollars. I mean, these are billions of dollars going into projects. Is there a slowdown? Is there a speeding up in 2019? Can you look ahead at 2019 for us a little bit and indicate what the plans are and what we can expect?
Now in Dubai, the focus is on Expo 2020, which one of the themes will be sustainability. And there will be lots of pilot projects that are going to be developed during this on the site. One example is, for example, fog harvesting. So it was traditionally used in mountain, how to condensate air humidity and use it, but it was used at a very small scale. So now they're trying to develop the concept and put it in buildings. So buildings can condensate some of the air humidity and reuse it in the building itself.
It's a whole new way to think about the skyline of Dubai.
Definitely.
Fog harvesting.
Now it's pilot. It's a technology that it's in infancy. We'll see how it goes. And one of the buildings in the expo will be equipped with such a device.
And in California, prediction, new governor, some new legislators, supermajority by the Democrats, $14 billion in the rainy day fund, $14 billion of surplus, a couple of tens of billions of dollars of fire damage to public and private assets in the last 3 months. Any predictions on 2019 that we can bank on?
I didn't bring my crystal ball to the meeting today.
They pay you the big money for this.
So maybe let's just finish up again where things are headed.
Yeah.
In terms of the discussion here. So California and Dubai are hydrologically very, very different. We've explored both sides of that spectrum. But what we share going into the future is that we have oversubscribed our limited water resources. So some of the solutions that apply to Dubai, for example, fog harvesting will never be a significant water supply for the state of California. But Camille mentioned use of gray water. So that's very interesting in commonality that we share. It is in widespread use in California, but there are certainly need and initiatives to find new creative applications of that. So just wanted to point out quickly, exciting new areas, like for example, in the Pajaro Valley, which is an agricultural area in coastal central California. They are re-injecting gray water, that is treated wastewater, back into the aquifers for eventual use for irrigation, as well as to fight saltwater intrusion, which is a major threat to the area. So there are lessons to be learned. Any area, no matter how developed, no matter how oil-rich or otherwise, how robust the economy, has lessons to learn from other areas, and we should be encouraging these kind of dialogues in cooperative learning water management.
Well, on that note, thank you both very much for bringing California and Dubai together. Brothers from another mother. We appreciate this a lot. Thank you.